By the way, I didn't tell you I make rosaries, did I?
We're live now. So
Oh,
hey,
what's going
Aidan.
on?
So you make rosaries?
I do.
Tell us, tell us.
For the past probably when I first started nursing, I started learning how I started going down the rabbit hole, doing paracord stuff because I love the rugged rosaries, but also wanted to like be able to give them to people that don't want to like spend money on rosaries, and so I started making miniature
Wow.
rosaries. But actually, David, that was just going to be a way to segue into saying like, give me your address at some point, and I'll mail you one
Sure.
because
Cool. Do you
because
ever do a
I
full one?
no. So the materials cost a lot of money,
Uh,
and if I had made full ones for people, it would take me too long. First of all, I haven't figured out how to make a full one because there are no templates
mm,
out there that are just that are like uniform. Everybody does them differently. Rugged Rosaries doesn't talk about much of that stuff. And I guess they wouldn't because their business model is set up on being able to make something look beautiful and sell it to people. So they don't want other people being able to completely emulate them,
have you got
which
a rugged rosary?
I have a couple of them.
Can you
Yeah,
show it to me in the audience?
sure.
Wow.
So the Black Monk Rosary is what I use,
Wow.
and
Can you show me
bunch.
how you thumb it?
I get just between. I slip through either my pointer and my thumb, or my middle finger
Do they
and my
move at
thumb.
all?
Yeah, they do a little bit, and when I'm like sitting in my car, I like slide them through
Okay.
both my pointer and my middle
So
finger.
you can
But
squeeze
there's
the fingers between them.
yeah, you can. Not my meaty fingers so much. Like I kind of push them around until I can, but I've
Okay.
been actually losing track lately. I've been like forgetting where I am, and I like
Okay.
absent-mindedly flip through them prematurely because
Uh-oh.
it feels so nice. It's so
Fidgeting.
like, yeah, it's good though. It's a good fidget device. Do you have your rosary on you?
You want me to grab it?
Yeah,
Here,
go get it.
just a sec. I don't want you to see my pajamas.
Go for it.
I don't know if you noticed, but in honor of Saint Louis de Montfort, I'm wearing my most ratty clothes today
Nice.
because he would exchange clothing with the bum that had the worst set of clothing
Is
wherever
that
he
what he
went.
would do?
Wherever he went, yeah.
Now, do you have a rugged rosary?
No, I don't. I can't afford it, but
Yeah, you
I thought about buying
yes,
one.
you can.
I thought about finding this. I don't know if you can see this. Someone gave this to me.
Lords. Oh, that's awesome. Is it actually from Lords?
Yeah, and it's been blessed by a priest at Lourdes.
That's really and you haven't broken it yet.
No, I had to patch it up.
Yeah.
You see the I don't know if you can see the wax. I put
Mm-hmm.
beeswax to patch up the frayed strings. Like the strings actually broke and I
Mm-hmm.
just used beeswax to hold it together. So it smells good. But I don't know if you can see the quality of the wood, but it's like wood from France, I guess.
That's
You
that's
can't really
really
see
nice.
it. It's
No,
nice.
but you know what? Most wooden beads are pretty high quality. I
Yeah.
mean, you're pretty much you have a couple of beads options, and when it comes into wood, most of the wood beads out there are pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have the beads with the rugged rosaries or resin, and then you have these terrible pony beads. So when you start making rosaries, you kind of have to like play around with different options, what's cheaper, what's not.
I'm showing you my technique. This is how I go
I
through it.
love your technique right here.
That's this is like
This is such a poor introduction to this whole thing. It's just like sloppy.
sloppy. I'll hang this right here on the microphone.
Now, do you hang out in between the beats since you have enough room to slide them? Because you got some space in between those bad boys.
Uh, yeah, like I just I don't know if you see what I'm doing, but I have my it's hanging on my index finger, and then I just have my thumb pressing,
Mm-hmm.
so I can feel I'm touching my finger through the string.
Nice.
That's how I like to do it. And there's a little mini bead in between the big beads. I think that's standard issue.
Oh, that is really nice. Oh, that would probably
You can
be a
think
nice
about
experience.
incorporating that in your next thing.
Yeah, when I get, well, I do not in between. I do not in between the metal beads that I use. So I do barrel
Okay.
knots in between them,
Okay.
and those are
They're like beads.
they're skulls. So
That's cool.
um,
So yeah, I like the whole ritual of praying it on my knees, but like I told you, I've been cheating lately and praying it on my bicycle,
nice.
and it's just a question of like as we've discussed many times, just I've been going through a rough patch, so I my faith's not as strong as it should be, and my devotions aren't as fervent as they should be and as they have been in the past, just for the past couple of years. But I think a lot of us are going through that. You did you hear the young
Definitely.
did you hear the
Me
young
too.
Italian on my podcast last week?
No,
He was
no.
he had just rediscovered his faith as a young
Mhm.
man at age 21, and now he's 25. But COVID is hurting his faith. It's not helping his faith. So it's good. It's good for me to hear that other people are struggling. No, I don't want people to struggle, but it's good to hear that I'm not the only one that's struggling. And a lot of the few priests that I have been able to see over the past 2 years, they've encouraged me that I'm not the only one struggling, and I'm not the only one under demonic attack either. So there's a lot going on spiritually.
Definitely.
So,
Me as well. I literally like I, a pool of sin is what I thought of myself as today. I'm like literally just like swimming, just awful. Like it's like,
mhm.
oh, I wonder if there will ever be a day, probably the day that I die, where I'm like, where I actually like look at myself and say, oh, I didn't sin as much as I usually do today, because usually it's just like, you know, writing everything down. Like got to take that one
You
to the
do
confessional.
you do write it down?
No, no, because I would be too scrupulous. But I mean, like it's usually just like this more ambiguous write down where it's like I keep that in the back of my head where I have this general feeling of dirtiness where I'm like it's time to go to confession now. But you know, right
Yeah,
now it's been like 2 weeks since I've gone, and I feel like I needed it the day that I went. And so you
yeah.
know,
Well, you're lucky.
sometimes
You can go every weekend if you want to, right?
yeah, I'm kind of, I guess I'm a pain because I just go up to the priest whenever I see one. I
Right.
need confession. And I'm just like, can you hear my
Yeah,
confession? And
yeah.
they're always like really surprised. They're like, you sure? And I'm like, yes, I am. And they're like, all right. So
We have to get I wish there were more people inconveniencing our priests so then they'd get in the habit. This is a nice illustration of I can never do the mirror thing. I don't know which way is up. Saint Louis Marie de Montfort. It's a pretty cute stained glass kind of. I don't know if it's a real stained glass window. Probably is.
do you wanna say what we were doing or what we were attempting to do that's already gone so poorly?
Yeah. Well, we're just going to discuss the Rosary. Like I think I did mention that in the description of the video. So
Okay. Yeah, I emailed you because the last time we spoke, we interwove some talks or some content about the rosary, and I was like, that was really cool. And I'm also narcissistic and selfish, and it's like, well, that's my primary prayer devotion, and I'm like, we should just talk about that specifically at some point,
yeah,
because it's fun
yeah,
and people pray it and people.
100%.
I'm also jealous that there's this deeply developed Orthodox theology around the Jesus prayer,
Mm.
and this tremendous following around it, which I think is it's awesome. It's like the coolest thing ever. But I'm like, I wonder why, when it comes to content about the Rosary, it's usually written from a place of here's how to begin, not I've been doing this for 50 years.
Uh-huh.
Here's what it's like after
Mm,
that amount of time. And a
mm,
couple of the materials, like St. Louis de Montfort, he writes from a place of having spent real time with the devotion. And some of his stuff, um, you know, is very French and scary, because it's very strict and very austere, and kind of like You know, I think he even talks about like flagellations in the Secret of the Rosary, like beating himself with the discipline every week, that type of thing. Um,
On that note, can I read you a little something about the birth of the Rosary?
yeah.
Forgive me if I don't read very well, but I'm just reading it right here in my book, God Alone, the collected writings of Saint Louis Marie de Montfort. So this is the second rose in the Secret of the Rosary book, which you have there. And I'll just jump in to the third paragraph where he says, I will tell you the story of how he, St. Dominic, received the Rosary, which is found in the very well-known book by Blessed Alain de la Roche, who's another big name in the history of the Rosary. St. Dominic, seeing that the gravity of people's sins was hindering the conversion of the Albigensians, a heretical group, withdrew into a forest near Toulouse, where he prayed continuously for 3 days and 3 nights. During this time, he did nothing but weep and do harsh penances in order to appease the anger of God. He used his discipline so much that his body was lacerated, and finally he fell into a coma. At this point, Our Lady appeared to him, accompanied by 3 angels, and she said, Dear Dominic, do you know which weapon the Blessed Trinity wants to use to reform the world? Oh, my lady, answered St. Dominic, you know far better than I do, because next to your Son, Jesus Christ, you have always been the chief instrument of our salvation. Then Our Lady replied, I want you to know that in this kind of warfare, the principal weapon has always been the angelic Psalter, which is the foundation stone of the New Testament. Therefore, if you want to reach these hardened souls and win them over to God, preach my Psalter. And by that, she means, of course, the angelic salutation and all the prayers of the Rosary. So that's it. I won't continue, but I just wanted to emphasize the strictness and the harshness of his penance. He went into a coma because he'd lacerated his body so harshly for 3 days and 3 nights. I'm not recommending that you do that, or that I do that, or that anyone listening does that.
But what's cool though is that she doesn't like poo-poo that, but she then offers something which
easier.
She says is, "Hey, do this, do this instead. This is how I wish to reform the world." And so,
right.
I guess that's, you know, probably how most people would probably choose to look at that, rather than focusing on the part where, like, what was that last part about him beating himself into a coma? Which seems pretty heretical, considering the Albigensians also were, they were known for
extreme
penance and like weird. So what was the heresy? Basically, they were
against marriage. They were against marriage. They were, I think they believed,
they thought the body was bad, the material was bad.
A sort of Gnostic teaching.
Right. Sex was bad unless it was unmarried. Because then there was nothing. I didn't understand that, but yeah, it was all really twisted stuff. And then the Rosary was used to combat that heresy and any other heresy going forward, which is very appealing to me. The idea that you can specifically combat heresy, personal heresy too, by sticking to that type of devotion.
It's amazing. He says something. I'm not going to dominate, but I'm excited. I'm excited to read a couple of the things that I just read while I was waiting to talk with you today. So
I prepared by not preparing.
I didn't prepare. I just was waiting for you, and I just opened the book literally for 2 seconds. Okay.
Cool.
But there's so much in here. There's one tiny quote here. It says, Almighty God has given the Rosary to you because he wants you to use it as a means to convert the most hardened sinners and the most obstinate heretics. So there's an explicit and very clear message that this is a tool in spiritual warfare to save our brothers and sisters. Okay? Those who have fallen away from the faith or never had the faith. Very powerful. We should remember this when we're praying our Rosary.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the ways to continue to keep my devotion fresh and fervent is going back and reviewing certain things associated with the Rosary that I just like let fall out of my mind when I'm actually praying in the devotion. But like there's a medicinal quality to the prayer that you have to be intentional with. But if you do choose to be intentional, it actually does the stuff that it says it's going to do. So like going through, like most of the rosary pamphlets they have the meditation, and then they have the fruit associated with the meditation. And one of the thoughts that came a couple weeks ago into my head was, what if that was all real? Like, what if all of that was as it's described? And it's you should expect those things. And I went back and like the sorrowful mysteries. I told you I was very attracted to the sorrowful mysteries lately, and always have been. But it just so happens that all of my deficits, some of my worst deficits, come from a place that can be combated with those specific mysteries. So you have the agony in the garden, which causes true contrition for sin. I lack true contrition, or at least perfect contrition. You have the scourging, which promotes purity, causes purity. You have the crowning with thorns, which is courage, which I'm an absolute coward. You have the carrying of the cross, which is long suffering or patience, and the crucifixion, which is I think maybe the crucifixion. The crucifixion might be. I'd have to look it up, but I think I always mix those two up. So I know that long suffering and patience they're interchangeable, but I feel like patience was attributed to the crucifixion and long suffering to the carrying of the cross, but I could be wrong. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
I'm just going to grab a book from my
Sure.
shelf.
Go for it. What's the book? What's the book?
The Standard Champions of the Rosary by Father Calloway.
Okay, I don't know that. It's good.
It's excellent. It is an excellent book. Basically, if you are a fan of the Rosary, then you should have this book. It lays out the history and the origins of the Rosary. It lays out a bunch of saints that are well known for promoting, and all the quotes that they've, not all the quotes, but a very comprehensive amount of quotes that those saints have said about the Rosary.
Including popes giving indulgences.
Tons of popes, indulgences. Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is most of those indulgences are, the way that indulgences have been changed, a lot of those sloughed away. But it also has a big section on how to pray the Rosary, and how to become a champion of it. There we go. Okay, so the crucifixion, perseverance. Yeah. is the fruit of the mystery for.
That's good. That's quite an important one. That means your faith will not fail at the end of life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean that's what we're all hoping for. So, and that's one of the specific promises too.
Saint Louis de Montfort said, I'm going to read you just a couple little things here. First of all, two contrasting quotes from opposite sides of this page. He says, first he says, so by all means we should eagerly crown ourselves with these roses from heaven, that's the rosary, and recite the entire rosary every day. That is, say 3 rosaries each of 5 decades. So 3 times 5 is 15. We have 20 today, okay? And then later in the next... not the following, but the second one, chapter or whatever it is, he says, of course it would be too much to expect you to say the whole 15 mysteries every day, but do say at least 5 mysteries. So he says we should do like 15 a day, and then he says, of course that's too much to ask, so do at least 5 a day, okay? And I do 5 a day. I've never really, I don't think, maybe once in my life I've done 20. But I want to read you just a little promise here. It says, if you say the rosary faithfully until death, I do assure you, this is St. Louis de Montfort speaking here, I do assure you that in spite of the gravity of your sins, you shall receive a never-fading crown of glory. Even if you are on the brink of damnation, even if you have 1 foot in hell, even if you've sold your soul to the devil, as sorcerers do who practice black magic, and even if you're a heretic as obstinate as a devil, sooner or later you will be converted and will amend your life and save your soul. If you say the rosary devoutly every day until death for the purpose of knowing the truth and obtaining contrition and pardon for your sins. So that's the condition. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
conditions. But pretty powerful statement about the power of this devotion, right?
And that's actually that quote, along with the testimony of Saint Bartolo Longo,
Mm.
is what set me on the Rosary devotion, and actually paved some of the ground for our first conversation.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember
which
that.
is which is awesome.
Mm.
Because he said I'd sign that statement in my blood,
Mm.
which you need that kind of confidence when you feel despair,
Mm.
and you also need somebody who's like, yeah, I committed animal sacrifice and committed, I don't know, the worst offenses possible, and now I'm a saint, and that's uh, and then holds up whatever their devotion of choice is, which just why I love Bartolo Longo so much.
Yeah.
But
He said one thing that
um,
stuck with me, one of the many things he said that was powerful to me early in my conversion and even today is uh, he made a vow or a promise or a commitment to never
mhm,
appreciate the beauty of a woman's face anymore, because that was a trap for him, for lust and
mhm.
for
He would never
everything.
appreciate the
Yeah, he
value.
wouldn't he
Okay,
wouldn't he would not give that any value. Okay?
gotcha.
He's not saying God is not a good artist. He's not saying God is not a good architect. He's not saying that God's creation is not good. What he's saying is, I will not value that. I will not pay any attention to that because it's
Hmm.
a trigger for me. And what I will focus on is inner beauty. And I think that's a good remedy against those of us who are tempted by beauty and that have been exposed to pornography all our lives, like
Hmm.
most people today have been, starting at a very young age. I was exposed to pornography as a very young child, and
Me
it's
too.
it's messed me up. Like, it really messed up everything, right? Psychologically, of course, sexually, everything. It's just really messed up.
Right.
And it's emasculating too. It's like I'm not as manly as I would have been if I hadn't been exposed to pornography at an early age. So it's horrible, and it damages relationships and everything. It's just horrible. So yeah, I think this idea of disregarding the beauty of God's creation in that particular way for men, because men are very visual, and focusing on the inner beauty only is a good weapon of choice. And it reminds me a little bit of Saint Francis de Sales, Saint Francis of Sales,
Hmm.
who met an actress or a princess or someone that was very rich and beautiful and well adorned, and hair, makeup, the whole thing, and the carriage and the pomp and ceremony and everything. And his reaction was not very good. And she said, "Do you not know who I am?" And he made some just very short comment about how, yes, he sees her and what he sees is ugly. And it's just, it was like he cut her to the quick, because he acknowledged the inner ugliness that she had that was
Hmm.
dominating. He was not fooled by the externalities, and he was not insulting God because God made her beauty, right? He was not,
Right.
this was not, nothing about insulting God and his creation. It was about what is important in this life to get to heaven. And it's not how cute you are, how sexy you are, or how well dressed you are, how well connected you are, or anything like that.
And don't know if you know this, but he was a devotee to the Rosary. Prayed the full 15 decades every day. Made a vow to pray it.
Wow.
And I was on. You always end up on weird threads as like a as a Catholic or as a Christian that's like, you know, into something, but or just as a nerd maybe. But I found like the way that he prayed his rosary, he would pray it from start to finish, at the cross, but then he would loop back around, down back again to the cross, saying the the glory be Hail Marys and the Our Father, and then I think he ended with the creed again, like
Ah.
as like a like a very circular way to approach it, which is
Ah.
like that's too much for me, but good for you, man.
Well, Saint Louis de Montfort says that we should not be looking for one recipe, one correct method.
Mm-hmm.
Make your own method. Make your
Yep.
own method. Make your own method. And the beauty of that is, the flower garden of the Rosary is going to be
Mm-hmm.
more diverse because diversity is a good thing, right?
It is. It is. And actually, I wanted to ask you: do you do your own introductory prayers to your rosary, to your daily rosary?
No, I just jump right in with the creed.
Mm-hmm.
I do have my own little tweaks like I do on the three beads. I
Mm-hmm.
do. This is all outlined in a video that you may have seen years ago that I posted about how I pray the rosary. I've got a little
The
video about that.
Decalogue rosary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It,
Mm-hmm.
it outlines all my
Yeah.
unique choices, why I make these choices, and I do the Decalogue. That's one thing I find very close to my heart is
Mm-hmm.
the Ten Commandments and just meditating on the Ten Commandments in conjunction with the mystery.
That's real.
Yeah,
And you take that through
the whole
even the luminous mysteries
all the
too. Correct.
mysteries. Yeah, all the
Cool.
mysteries. All the mysteries. Yeah.
Can I read you a quote?
Yes.
All right, so I have a book here called A Doorway to Silence. This is by Robert Llewellyn. This man was an Anglican priest, and he fell in love with the Rosary. He was, I guess, a curator. He lived at the St. Julian of Norwich shrine in England, and he fell in love with the rosary, and he started rosary groups, and he wrote a book about the contemplative use of the rosary in the 80s. And I was on a blog and it mentioned this book, and it's not in print anymore, so I had to order it and got a nice slightly damaged version from Amazon, which I am in love with. It's very short, but it's got some really good stuff in it. Some really
Did you pay a lot for that?
$10 maybe.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
but it's one that I would definitely recommend having. There is some questionable stuff in here too, because
Mm-hmm.
he's definitely into Zen Buddhism, but
Okay.
his his some of his recommendations are just really beneficial, because we get so tied to like the formula of what we're doing, that it can be it can almost be anti-prayer. Like you block the Holy Spirit from coming in
Yeah.
when he needs to. And so some of the suggestions he gives would probably scandalize, Taylor Marshall, but they're really good. I think they're really good. But this is how he introduces his book. It's called The Peasant Woman Telling Her Beads. The French writer Maricol has a beautiful description of an elderly peasant woman telling her beads before the cottage hearth. He writes, "The monotony of those repetitions clothes her with physical peace and recollection, and her soul, already directed on high, almost mechanically, by her habitual gesture of drawing out the rosary, immediately opens out with increasing serenity on unlimited perspectives, felt rather than analyzed, which converge on God. What does it matter then if the humble soul does not concern herself with living over and over again the exact meaning of the formula which she is repeating? Often she does better. She allows herself to rise freely into a true contemplation, well-worn and obscure, uncomplicated, unsystematized, alternating with a return of attention to the words she is muttering, but building up in the long run on the mechanized basis they afford a higher, purified personal prayer."
Nice.
And when I read something like that, I think I want all of that. And Saint Louis de Montfort, he touches on that. And he doesn't write about it in the same exact way, and sometimes you have to do a little bit of digging for it. Sometimes he outrightly discusses mental prayer, but it's only a couple of offhanded references. But spending some real time with the prayer has taught me that it truly is something that's supposed to open us to contemplation, and that's why Mary wanted it for the entire world, because it's a bridge between the most basic introductory prayers all the way to the highest heights of contemplation. And if you're praying it, you don't have to worry so much about, you know, not getting it right, or whatever it is that we think we have to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I do, I do, I'm aware of the poverty of my prayer life. I'm aware of the impatience I have when it comes to prayer time.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm not in prayer time, I just love having a open channel
Mm-hmm.
prayer, like just it's like awareness, just
Mm-hmm.
little one word prayers, that sort of thing. That is natural and easy for me. It's not, it's nothing spectacular either, but at least it's natural and it's wholesome, as opposed to my fixed prayers, which are full of anxiety. And I've talked about this for years. Everyone listening to my channel knows this about me. But I am also thinking about what the promise that was made by Saint Louis de Montfort there in that little paragraph I read you about the most hardened sinner. If you sold your soul to the devil, whatever it is, eventually you will be reformed. You'll have a change, amend your life, and all this sort of thing. I do have that same thought every day. It's like I'm really not good at praying. I'm really impatient. I'm really scanty with what I'm giving to God here. It's like he who gives sparingly will receive sparingly. But on the other hand, I say, but if I keep praying the way I'm praying, uh, what I'm hoping and praying for is that I will learn to pray. Eventually, I'll learn to be calm during prayer and I'll have some depth to my prayer instead of just like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping I'll have some depth and I'll grow. And I'm planting seeds. I may not be planting them properly. I'm kind of scattering them, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping that just one of them will take root and that will give me some depth to my prayer life overall. And I mean, it is pathetic. Frankly, it is pathetic and humbling, my prayer life, how bad it is. But there is that hope that persisting in it and humbly being aware of how crappy I am at prayer will eventually bear some fruit. Just like he promises, like even if you've sold your soul to the devil, if you
Right.
persist, if you just persist, just trust the plan, kind of thing.
You think true prayer will just sneak in through the back door, and
Well,
you
I
won't
think I'll
realize it?
mature. I think I'll mature. Eventually, I'll mature
Mm-hmm.
and I'll stop being as selfish and as worldly and as sensual and as greedy and lustful and all that. I'll
Mm-hmm.
become hopefully I'll become a Christian and kill the old man. Kill
Yeah.
the old man, and it's no longer I who live, but Christ. That's the dream. That's the goal, right? To
Mm-hmm.
to become a Christian. That's the goal. Because
Right.
I'm not really comfortable saying it. I mean, I will check the box and I'm striving to be Christian, but it's like not there yet. And it's exciting to think about that, but it's also daunting because there's a responsibility and you have to be courageous. You have to be in the fray, like in the battle, active, instead of just passively like hiding away, reading and just pretending you're Christian, like what I do. But
And me. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, one day I think the Lord works in mysterious ways, and I think that everyone has a time. And so, like, if I'm sitting on the bench, like in a sports analogy, I don't know much about sports, but if I'm sitting on the bench, keeping the bench warm, and maybe cheering on the people that are on the ice, like the Saints, uh, maybe the coach will put me in. That was one of my earliest prayers when I converted. It's like, hey, what are you going to use me for, God? Are you going to use me for anything? Are you going to do anything with me? Like, am I going to be an instrument of your grace? And basically, it's like, not yet. You know what I mean? It's like, not yet. But maybe that's what I need. I need to sit on the bench for a while. And, I do my little things. I do my prayers. I do my
Your
readings. I
videos.
do my
Your
videos. I interview
Yeah.
people like you.
Yep.
And I'm promoting the rosary in my own small way. I've got a couple of
Yep.
videos about it. And I bought some rosaries and handed them out to people at work. And they didn't really like that. They thought I was freaky. Like, why are you pushing your religion on me? Even though
Right.
most of them are ostensibly Catholic to begin with, but it's just weird, right? When you start pushing stuff on people.
I've given out rosaries that I've made at work, and it's been met with pretty good
Yeah,
reception.
nice.
It's been received well. Yeah, I can't speak
Yeah,
whenever I talk to you.
yeah.
Um, I'm just like raw mouth vomit. But it could be because it's Florida. But it could also be because I made them.
Yeah,
So maybe there's something
yeah.
like behind, like, wow, you made that? Like, you're
Nice.
not,
Yeah.
You're not just that weird dude that farts at the nurse's station, which yes, I am.
The
But
ones the ones I gave out were like cheap white plastic. You've seen the cheapest one you can buy. It's like
I
a dollar
do. I love
dollar
those.
each.
Those are great.
Dollar
They're
each.
so bad. They always like hang them over Mother Mary statues, and I'm like, she doesn't like that. She doesn't like that one.
I
I'll give that
hung
to her.
I hung a I hung one each on all of our vehicles at work. We have 3 trucks in a van, and I
Mm-hmm.
hung them from the rear view mirror, and no one's taken them down or anything.
It
Whereas,
hasn't caused any car accidents, have they?
no,
Dude, I used to always. My grandma would make rosaries, right? And we'd always get them and we'd hang them on the rear view mirrors, and then you're like cranking your wheel to the right, and you get your hand stuck in the rosary, and it would tear the crucifix off, and you wouldn't be able to turn the steering wheel the way you're supposed to. And it's just like it's happened way too many
no, no,
times.
no, no. The trick is I triple, quadruple wrap it around so it's just the crucifix is just barely hanging beneath
Gotcha.
the thing.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Nah, man, I'm letting the flag fly, but in the meantime, I'm just like we're gonna die if we take a right hand turn.
I do.
Everybody.
I'll use that as a segue to just talk about why I've got a flag for Quebec and a flag for Canada behind me in the shot here, and why I've got my new favorite mug, which is I support Truckers Freedom Convoy 2022. I don't know if you can see that,
Love it. Did you
but
make it, or did you just buy it?
no, I just bought it. I bought it online. It just arrived today. But the reason I bought the flags, I bought those in real life. The reason I bought, and I have bigger ones too. But
Yeah.
the reason I bought those, I'm going to Ottawa. I already talked to you about this, but I'll just tell the audience. I'm going to Ottawa to support the truckers because I'm a white supremacist, fascist, misogynist, racist, whatever, as Justin Trudeau claims. So
It's true. When he saw me, he said, "Why are you bugging me again, Whitey?" And I was like,
did you see the joke about Trudeau? He said, this is a joke, but Trudeau says, "Oh, the only reason they hate me is because I'm black." Right? Have you seen?
"Haven't seen
You
that."
don't get the joke. You don't get the joke.
Is he super white?
No, it's because he's worn blackface more times than he can remember.
He has.
Yeah, like they asked him in the parliament, "How many times have you worn blackface?" He's like, "I don't know, more times than I can remember." And there are photos like
That was serious.
yeah. Check on the internet. There are plenty of photos of him in blackface.
You ever notice though that like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? They can wear blackface and they just get away. Everybody's just like, good episode, and then other people do it and they just. I always want to know like why is it inappropriate for some people, but then other people it's just like no, we good times. Like,
I don't know.
have
Is
you
that a
ever?
real thing?
Yeah. Okay, so I mean I only have two solid examples, but I guess because everybody just thinks It's Always Sunny is funny. Have you ever seen that show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? Don't watch it.
Okay.
But they have several episodes where they make sequels to the Lethal Weapon films.
Okay.
And one of them has to wear blackface to obviously be one of the characters. And then the other thing I'm thinking of is a movie called Tropic Thunder. And it's about a bunch of spoiled actors who are making a movie together about the Vietnam War, and they get thrown into this actual dangerous situation. But Robert Downey Jr.'s character in it is such a diva that he literally gets reconstructive surgery and like pigmentation, I guess treatments to make himself black to play the character that he's supposed to play for this film, and it's outrageous. I mean, it's it's really good, but I think that was like 2008 or 2009. And Ben Stiller directed that film, but everybody was like, "Yeah, that was hilarious. That was really good job." I mean, they were pointing out the absurdity of blackface, but I mean, still, people can't even point the absurdity of something out by doing it without getting, heavily criticized. So I'm surprised that film still exists and people still like they haven't gone after it.
You know, I'm not politically correct, and I've got some pretty strange views about racism. But I don't have a problem with blackface. I don't have a problem with someone like a 12-year-old kid at the school play playing the hunchback, and he puts all the stuff on his back, and he's all hunched up, and he's got the deformed face augmentation thing. I don't have a problem with that. It's like there are people with hunchback. I feel bad for them, like they're deformed. Right. I feel bad for them. Being black is not a deformity. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not comparing like that. But like, if you want to have a school play about China, I don't mind if they tape the eyes back, like in the slit eyes or whatever they call it. Like, I don't
This
have a
was
problem
supposed
with
to be
that.
the least controversial topic.
I just
And then
don't
it's
have a
just like,
problem
nah,
with. I don't have a problem with
gotcha.
it. If you want to be like the Scarecrow from the Wizard of Oz and you dress up like a scarecrow, I'm not offended by that. Right? I'm not
Right.
offended by anything. You could be anything you want to be in the fantasy world of theater and whatever.
Hmm.
I mean, hopefully it'll be a nice Christian story with the Christian morality and all this sort of thing. That's more what I'm concerned about. Is like, is it Christian? Is this godly?
Hmm.
Is this wholesome?
Sure.
So yeah, I just wanted to get it off my chest.
Well, and I mean, there's glaring inconsistencies too, because clowns are still something that are like everybody's cool with clowns, but no, not many people realize that like clowns are actually a parody of Irish people, and so it's an Irish face. Like the red nose,
Are you
the
serious?
dead serious,
Oh
dude.
my
It's
god.
the Irish equivalent of blackface,
Oh
and
my
people
god.
are like, yeah, clowns are cool, but like, I mean,
Oh, are you sure
no,
about that?
yeah, I mean, we could do some quick Googlings, but
Oh my god, that is
yeah.
hilarious. That
And
is
now
hilarious.
I'm having to question myself, but clowns are the Irish, an
Irish
Irish,
face. Irish
uh,
face.
Irish face.
That is hilarious. With the big shoes, the water squirting out of the flower.
Let's see.
I believe you. You can send me
Yeah,
the link. You can send me the link later.
we'll see. We'll see. But yeah,
You do know I'm of Irish, mostly of Irish descent, right?
and so our family is as well. And no, I didn't. I just assumed that all Canadians are French.
No, no,
No.
I'm not native to Quebec at all. I'm from the neighboring province of Ontario, where it's all Protestant waspy types,
Oh, okay.
whiter than white, English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh,
You guys
etc.,
do have a
etc.
melting pot. The what's the accent? The
Mosaic.
yeah. Okay.
We say mosaic because we don't try to dissolve someone's culture. This is what I learned 40 years ago in school.
Hmm.
We don't try to do like what they do in the States, where they try to just sort of melt into the same pot. What we do is we just have a mosaic. So you've got little bits of color here. You've got Jewish neighborhood over there. So
Hmm.
that sounds bad, right? Jewish neighborhood over there. But they do call it the ghetto, by the way. They do call it the Jewish ghetto, and they've
Is it
got
actually a ghetto or is it just what they
no. It's
call it?
just where they hang out. It's just where they hang out.
I'm like, it's like
They
a rough spot where
they like to
like rabbis come after you, like, give me your money. Like,
they they dominate large parts of Montreal, different neighborhoods, Mile End, and I don't know the other parts, Hampstead or something. I don't know. But no, we've got like little Jamaican part. We got Italian.
Jamaican Canadians.
Yeah,
Oh man, I feel like they're far from home there.
they're
Like
freezing.
what?
They're
Yeah,
freezing to death.
like what a terrible trade up. Like you could be in Jamaica. uh,
Oh,
so all right, let me see if I got a,
back
let
to
me
the
see if
rosary.
I was gonna say, let me see if I've got a quote
Yeah, but
from,
you have to read it with your best Jamaican accent, okay?
oh yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah,
That's
man.
terrible.
Yeah, man.
Man. Uh, it's not gonna happen.
You keep coming back
It's
on my show, even though I keep making you feel uncomfortable with the whole race thing.
I know it wells up inside of me, but I'm just like, I'm actually not that uncomfortable. I'm a really inappropriate person in real life. I just like
You'll
to,
get used to it
just like to
eventually.
hide my true colors.
It's a race to the quotes. Who can come up with a juicy quote first?
Yeah, and all of mine really just tend around like what is the prayer itself and what does it give me. So, all right, let's go through this because I think this is really um, a cool part of the prayer. And I will say that when I stumbled into a group of elderly women the other week praying the rosary, we were
Right.
talking about another prayer devotion, and I'm
Mm.
like, oh yeah, the apparently the promises associated with whatever this prayer devotion was are awesome, and they're like, oh, we don't care about that, and I was like, that was the most baller
Mm.
like metal
Mm.
thing you could have just said. Like, I don't care about the promises, I just like the
Mm.
prayers, and I'm like, yeah, you do. I'm like,
Yeah.
give me the candy though. All right,
Ah.
so this is the 27th rose, the benefits. Um, So I should like to give you even more reason for embracing this devotion with so many great souls have practiced. The Rosary, recited with meditation on the mysteries, brings about the following marvelous results. 1. It gradually gives us a perfect knowledge of Jesus Christ. 2. It purifies our souls, washing away sin. 3. It gives us victory over all of our enemies. 4. It makes it easy for us to practice virtue. Still waiting for that one.
Mhm.
5. It sets us on fire with the love of our blessed Lord. 6. It enriches us with graces and merits. And 7. It supplies us with what is needed to pay all our debts to God and to our fellow man. And finally, it obtains all kinds of graces for us from Almighty God.
Mhm.
Those are not different in quality, but they're different in content from like the traditional 15 promises of the Rosary, and so that's why they fascinate me. I really love the first one, a perfect knowledge of Jesus Christ, which
Mhm.
is like a really like that's kind of a
Bold statement.
fantastic claim, yeah, to say that like you could have perfect knowledge of Jesus, and I'm interested to hear your take on that.
Well, it's because it's a compendium of the Bible, right? As we discussed last time, mini
Yeah,
microcosm of the scriptures, and you can dive in as deep as you want and as broad as you want. I think that's my initial reaction to that bold claim. The other thing is just like uniting to God, all three persons through prayer. I mean, that should be a given. I think I'm not there yet,
no, and neither am I.
but that is the goal. Like if you read the great mystics who enter into contemplation and they have that mysterious union,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't say much about it other than it's wonderful. But
I
that's the goal.
okay. Well, so for me, I was thinking of it in terms of those things are all correct, but I thought of it as like having perfect knowledge in a direct experiential way, which is just as exciting and a little less analytical because I don't feel smart enough to like be able to study myself into a knowledge of God, and I feel like that's how a lot of people are very heady and they like that approach. I
Yeah,
feel
but
like people that
didn't I just say that the goal of all prayer is to have that mystical union
yeah,
that
you
can't be
did.
described by words? Like
Yep.
that's a direct knowing.
Experience.
Yeah,
Yeah, the first things you
beyond
said
words.
were
Yeah, okay.
through
Okay.
the Bible, you know,
Yeah.
and through the mysteries, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But immediately I just slough that away
Right.
because I'm just like, oh, that's too much work. But
Yeah. And too artificial maybe in some ways.
maybe, but maybe not. Because a lot of people, you know, but that's the thing too. People don't show you and it's not exactly like that with the Rosary either. People don't direct the practitioner of prayer how to go from reading about to engaging with. And so like when I first picked up the Rosary and started playing around with the mysteries, um, you know, it was like a very straightforward from beginning to end. The mystery had to start where the mystery started and then ended where the mystery ended. And then I was like, if I'm not doing it right, then I'm not doing it right. And it slowly changed from that to including myself in the mystery and participating in it in some way. And then I stuck with that method for a long time. And that didn't feel right after a while because it felt too artificial. It felt good. There were good moments of that, but it also felt like, oh, you can be deceived through that method, which you can. And then for a long time, it was, and it's still kind of hovering in this spot too, um, where I would have the mystery lightly veiled in the background as I'm praying the prayers. I'm not intellectually trying to penetrate the mystery. Um, I'm not trying to think of it from start to finish. It's almost kind of like just tasting it, you know what I mean, and then going forward with the prayers,
Yeah.
and trying to meet God in real time, and trying to be conscious of the present moment because that's not really spoken about too much in engaging with the prayers. It's very much you need to focus on the Hail Mary and you need to focus on the meditation. And one is not more important than the other, but you can't have one without the other. And which is a good way to, it's good to have those parameters in place, but at some point, those things kind of start to slough off and like we become fluid in those parameters and kind of bounce between them. And it doesn't have to be, that's why I love de Montfort, but also like am bothered by him a bit because he's very much like he's very Hitlery about everything. He does you need to do this, and if you don't, then that's a sin, and more so than being sinful, I would say it's just ineffective. It's ineffective if you're not following certain parameters.
I don't think he ever says you're guilty of sin
if you intentionally are distracted or careless. But like the parameters he sets up is if you don't follow his methodology, then you're being careless or being.
Yeah, but he doesn't have one methodology. That's the thing.
No, he does. No, but it's always very clear that you need to be focusing full attention at all times, which I think. What is attention? What is focus? If I'm not paying attention to the Hail Mary and I'm kind of if I'm saying it, if I'm praying it, but I'm not like hanging on to every word, and I have the meditation lightly held in my head, but sometimes floating away from it, it's kind of going back to my words, but not gripping onto everything, just kind of like being peaceful with it. One might look at that and say, well, that's being too lax. That's too namby-pamby. You need to be really focusing your mind on that. And I would say, well, maybe no, you don't have to do that. In fact, gripping it up too much is like Lenny and the rabbit. You're going to kill the rabbit. You need to take a step back and just sit inside of it and notice and notice things. You don't have to be so heavy-handed.
Yeah. I as I was listening to you sort of talk about the pros and cons of the different sort of levels of intensity and how you can just soak it in and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It brought to mind one of the most fruitful approaches that I've discovered for myself is making it, because I'm very self-centered, I make it about me and my salvation. It's like, okay, there's sin and there's grace. Like I can either say yes to grace and no to sin, or yes to sin and no to grace. Like there's no in between, right? But it can fluctuate during a course of a given day. I can say yes to grace now, and then later say yes to sin, whatever. It's a mixed bag moment to moment. But my point is, the objective for me is to get to heaven and to, for God's sake, because God is good, not because I fear hell. That's the ultimate, goal.
Wait, that's the objective of your prayer or your
my whole life, my whole existence. Okay, yeah, my whole existence, right? So when I pray the rosary, one thing that helps me focus is my eternal soul's on the line here. I'm praying not for fun and not to just check off the checklist that I did it. I'm praying as part of my walk with God, and it's going to help me get to heaven. And so what helps keep me focused is not only it's that thing with the Decalogue again. It's with the 10 Commandments where I say, look, I'm violating all 10 commandments, because if you violate one iota, you violate all 10 commandments. So I'm a sinner. Okay, number one. So what am I depriving myself of with the Annunciation? What am I depriving myself of? And I place myself mystically that, I'm not in space and time now. I'm in prayer. So I'm not in space and time. So I can go right there, Mary and the angel and the Annunciation. And what am I depriving myself of by choosing selfish pleasure and sin over grace?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you assign that an image, or do you just?
I don't.
You do. Okay.
I don't assign it an image, but I have an image because one of the first church I came into was a monastery, and they had a big painting of the Annunciation.
Oh, cool.
Am I mistaken? or no, okay, they had a big
Such a
painting.
liar.
No, they had a big painting of the Visitation, but I have in my mind another painting. I don't know where I saw this painting. It's a famous painting of the Annunciation where she's just kneeling.
Hmm.
I was told by one of the great saints that she was sitting or standing at the Annunciation. She definitely was not kneeling at the Annunciation. But I have an image of her kneeling in my head because it comes from this famous medieval painting, which I'm sure you've seen. I have an image of her, Mary, kneeling at the Annunciation. But a great saint, I forget which one, maybe Saint Alphonsus Liguori, I'm reading him all the time, said she would either be standing because she's a queen or sitting because she's a queen. She would not be kneeling because she's the queen of the angels. So when the angel comes, she's not kneeling before the angel. That's what
I don't know why,
the
but I
great
like
saint.
the idea of her sitting.
Yeah.
I like the idea of like being receptive, of being like open to God and like taking it in because I'm so aggressive with everything.
You?
I like the idea. Yeah. Like I'll wear everything down to the nub, and so like with prayer, that's probably where my methodology comes through. Like I love to get so into something that it becomes undefined. So when I was really into yoga, I was so in love with it that I jumped deep into my practice, into my asana practice. And there were certain points when I'm like, what I thought I knew about yoga was just so wrong. And I'm like, I have no idea what yoga even is, as I was continuing the practice. And as weird as that a place that was to be in there, it was also really cool because I was like, wow, this is so neat that I get to love something to such a depth that I get to, like, we always set up like a definition for something, but you jump so far deep into it that you're like, wow, no, those that stuff doesn't even begin to describe whatever this is. And that's how prayer has been for me, where it's like you do such a deep dive into it that it's like it starts to undefine itself and those parameters start to slough off and you see how they're necessary, but they're not necessary at certain points, because you have to start somewhere. Like there is a physicality to yoga. You have to start in that physicality before you can get to any kind of depth. And it's the same thing with prayer. In fact, not even a comparison. Prayer is the ultimate. It's communication. It's union with God. But like to set up those parameters and then to deep dive into them and to have them slough off at some point is like, that's my goal when I'm in prayer. And I don't know if I've gotten there yet, but I've definitely gotten into the rosary to a degree where like what you're describing with the Annunciation, there's that kind of mystical transportation where you just you're outside of time and space, and it's very freeing, very nice. But I also interrupted you. I want you to
No,
keep
no, no,
telling me
no, no, no,
about
no, no.
the no, I really want to know though, because
Well, I was using the Annunciation just as an example. No particular reason, just because it's the first one or whatever. But the idea is with a pleasant mystery, and or 15 of the 20 are pleasant, right? You've got the 5 sorrowful and the rest are pleasant.
I'm sick, man. I think the sorrowful mysteries are the most pleasant of all, because Jesus is just such a man.
Yeah,
He's just
yeah,
like he's my man. He's just like
yeah.
such a burly dude, and I just cheer him on.
But I make a sharp delineation and a distinction between the sorrowful and all the rest, okay?
Uh-huh.
Because of this approach that I have where it's about me and my salvation with my sin and my sin and grace, okay? So with the sorrowful, it's very easy. It's like I'm torturing Jesus. I'm crowning Jesus with thorns. I'm burdening him with the cross. I'm nailing him to the cross, whatever. It's like, it's easy, okay? It's like my sin did this to him, and my sins, even now, like if I sin tomorrow, it's going to be contributing back 2,000 years ago to his suffering, okay? So that's easy. But the other category is the pleasant things, the Annunciation and all these sorts of good mysteries, joyful and luminous and glorious.
Mm-hmm.
What am I depriving myself of when I choose sin? I'm depriving myself of witness to that. I'm depriving myself of proximity spiritually to that, appreciation of that. So if there's going to be a crowd trying to like move up and get closer to the Annunciation, right, mystically back 2,000 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
like, am I going to have a seat or a place close to that scene or far from that scene? Well, it depends on my purity and my holiness and how much I love God and these sorts of things. So there's an incentive. That's the carrot, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
carrot is you're depriving yourself of this. Like, hey, do you want it? Do you want to have a front row seat at the Annunciation? Then say yes to grace and no to sin. And it's the same with all of what I call the pleasant
That's
mysteries.
cool.
And then with the sorrowful, like I already said, like, hey, do you want to be the one that's contributing? Like, how much do you want to contribute? You've already contributed a lot to his suffering. Do you
Right.
really want to contribute more? So those are the sort of two modes that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And the sorrowful are my favorite because it's just a lot easier. It's a lot. I prefer the stick for myself to the carrot. Okay,
Right.
I prefer the stick because it's more dramatic. It's more obvious. Like it's obvious that no, 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 don't ever sin again. Not even venial sin. It's just more obvious. Whereas if
Right.
it's the carrot, it's like, oh well, if I'm not front and center in the front row watching all these scenes mystically, uh, whatever, you know. But do I want to hurt my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? No, I don't. On paper, in theory. The other thing I wanted to mention just quickly before I let you respond is about the boyfriend girlfriend thing, where it's like, oh, my boyfriend, he went to Harvard and he's got his own law firm and he's got a nice house, he's got a nice car, and his family's the best family in town, and his father's the mayor, and da 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 da, and our kids are the best, and whatever. Like this sort of thing where you've got a checklist for your lover, your spouse, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way of measuring happiness in marriage. The other way is, what do you like about your husband? I don't know. I mean, I just love him. I love looking at his face. I like staring into his eyes. I like how he holds me. I like how he smells. I like his presence. I like when he's there. I just like when he's there. What do you talk about? I don't know. We don't say much. You know, it's a different kind of vibe rather than
Mm-hmm.
like check, 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 check. Like, wow, look at what my husband is. And I'm using this analogy to our relationship with God, with Jesus Christ, and with all three members of the Trinity, because the academic intellectual checklist approach is obviously inferior to that mysterious, organic. I don't know what it is. I don't know who he is. I don't know. It's a mystery. You know, God's a mystery, and that includes the divine nature of Christ. That's a mystery. Even the human nature of Christ is a mystery. Even my own human nature, the human nature of my wife, the human nature of my family members, friends, enemies. It's just very mysterious. You know, it's infinitely exciting and interesting. And so that's why I prefer the organic, mystical, mysterious approach to romantic relationships rather than quantifying. So I guess it comes down to what it comes down
Mm-hmm.
to in romantic relationships and in religion is quality over quantity, right?
Right. Yeah, and the rosary kind of serves as a lens or like a prism to look at Jesus through. And essentially, I just think of it as like borrowing Mary's person or whichever saint you want, and then entering through them to look at Jesus and gain perspective and quality time, which is also very convenient because, you know, in an act of humility, it's like, well, I am a heap of garbage. Uh, Literally, sinning as I'm praying the rosary. Pulled up one day to work and I put my car into reverse and got my rosary stuck in the gear shifter. I'm like, oh shit. And I'm like, not even realizing that I'm like, oh yeah, that had to laugh. I'm like, sorry, you
Yeah.
know, um,
Yeah.
but and then there's this strong temptation to feel like really guilty about that. And it's just like, well, you know what? At least you're praying enough to be praying while you're sinning,
What was
but
sinful about it?
just the language wasn't nice.
Oh my God. If you're holding me to that high of a standard, I'm screwed.
Dude, well, that's very mild considering, but the whole thing is that it's like prayer time. Like it's always kind of like there needs to be this kind of sacredness, and not that I don't ever go to God and swear because I do that all the time, where I'm just like, oh, um, because it would be kind of dishonest, to not like just say how I'm
So there's the goody version of you during prayer time, and then the raunchy version of you.
No, because the raunchy version always comes out during prayer subconsciously too, and then I kind of sometimes it's kind of the point where I just like laugh at certain things that just like pop up into my head. I'm like, oh, that's horrible. I'm like, well, okay, that's cool, whatever, because you can't like
Hide it from him.
you can't hide it. So and it's also just like it's also so clearly an attack of Satan. It's so transparent. It's just like think about this person, and it's
Yeah.
just like okay. Actually, the most shameful moments that I've been having during prayer lately are or anger,
Oh.
or because it's
Oh.
or it's not anything sexual. I mean, and then sometimes the sexual is so shocking that it does manage to make me go, oh, no, stop. But most of the time it's just like oh, that's just Satan again.
What are you angry about?
Can't really remember off the top of my head. I just
Okay.
know that there's like stuff at work
Oh,
and
okay.
just
Okay.
like random stuff where I'm just like
Aggravation.
raging, yeah, or not being nice to somebody, and then I'm like rosary. I'm like oh, I'm gonna pray, and I'm just like you're just being a total douchebag to that person. Why don't you like, and then you just have no problem just like whipping out you know your rosary and like saying a couple of prayers without thinking like you were just being really really unloving and very sinful, and now you're just gonna like chat with God. And again, you should be able to just chat with God whenever, but also keep in mind that like like in the reading last week with Isaiah, like I'm an unholy man. I need that coal to be touched to my mouth, and that's what the rosary essentially is. But I need to be I need to be cognizant of that connection. So I need that moment of realization to like come in and say like just remember that you were being really awful,
Hmm.
and that you need to take that and you better be contrite. You better find some contrition in there, and or you better ask for it, because those are not compatible
Yeah.
in the end. But there's something else I wanted to say to you, but I can't remember.
Time's
Can't
up.
remember what it's.
Time's up. Gotta go. No, just kidding.
Gotta
But
bounce.
I do remember this week. Was it this week? Yeah, this week I did a bit of a mess up. I messed up at work. I did a pretty stupid thing,
Mm-hmm.
just through negligence, and it cost the company some money, and I felt bad, and I was on the road going back to the shop, and I'm like, what am I going to say? And instantly I had all these lies, like these perfect lies that would cover my ass, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is the perfect lie. And I wasn't saying, okay, David, make up a lie. It was just flooding in my head. Like, this will cover it up. This will cover it up. This will be a good excuse. This is a good excuse. And I had all this like brilliant ideas coming from God knows where. And I just prayed to God at that moment. I reached out and touched the rosary that's hanging from the rear view mirror of every vehicle. And I just said, help me to be humble and make a good confession to my boss,
Mm-hmm.
an honest confession to my boss about what really happened. That's all. Right. So I didn't really listen to the chatter in my head, like, hey, here's how you can get away with it. Here's how you can do it.
Right.
And they were brilliant ideas. Like, this was like, wow. But I
And
just,
it just didn't make you think like, was that David,
I don't know.
or do you know what
Yeah.
do
Yeah. Yeah.
you ever
Yeah.
get that
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
meta?
yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Constantly,
yeah.
constantly. I mean, in my life, it's a constant thing. Like, it's like, okay, there's part of it is like, well, I know how I used to be. Like, I when I was not striving to be honest, I know that I enjoy lying. It's fun to lie. I'm good at lying and all that sort of thing. So I know that part of it comes from me. But even that, I was being fueled by Satan and his lies,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, obviously, it didn't come from God. And I mean, am I going to take credit like I'm a genius liar? Like, no, it's more humble to say at least part of it came from Satan. So it's the same thing today. It's like, I mean, I'm still flooded with ideas, images. Like, thankfully, lately, the demonic attacks have stopped with all the sexual imagery and all the perverted sex and violence stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still susceptible to like making excuses if I do something wrong or whatever. Like, and I just that example at work this week where I just made a simple prayer to God, like, just help me make a good confession. And then when I saw my boss right away, I just told him. There was no anxiety. I just told him
Mm-hmm.
it's in God's hands. Whatever happens, right? And I said, I'll pay the damages, whatever it was that I caused, like the company or whatever it was. And I won't go into details what I did. It was just a stupid mistake,
Mm-hmm.
just negligence, okay? But he right away just said, "Don't worry about it. Shit happens, and no big deal, no big deal."
Yeah,
And this has happened before to other people, and it's not the first time. It's not a big deal, right? And then
that's
and then my supervisor came in, and I told him one on one the same thing, and he said, "No, no, no, don't worry about it. Just try to be more careful in the future. That's it." So
just denounce your faith and get rid of all the rosaries in the cars.
no, but the point of the story is that I felt bad. I felt really bad and guilty. And then I had these lies coming to my head. How do I lie? How do I lie? I wasn't seeking it, but it was just coming into my head.
Mm-hmm.
But I made the prayer and I said, I'm just going to confess it simply and honestly. And then I felt better. Like, I mean, this is just psychology 101. And this is not advanced. This story that I'm telling you is like everyone can relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very powerful. Even though it's simple, it's very powerful in terms of like how we should live. We should live like honest, simple people and not get caught up in the sophistication of adults, how we're always covering our tracks and lying and this sort of thing. It's just so liberating.
Which is ironic.
It's liberating
because it's actually very childlike. It's such a to like backtrack and to like, oh, gotta hide this from dad, you know? And it's like,
yeah. No, but
and our
it's just
brains are
better.
annoying.
Yeah,
because it already starts like doing the work for you, and then you and then if you're not self-aware enough, you can start feeling guilty for having those thoughts where you're just like,
yeah,
and it's like, hold on, you didn't agree to anything.
yeah,
You can
exactly,
you can step back and do all the right stuff. Like, you don't have to engage with this, but
you can even appreciate the genius of the ideas. Like I said, I was just like, wow,
right,
these are good ideas. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah, good one,
But
Satan.
I'm not it. I'm just not interested in going down that path.
Right.
But yeah, so I think that's part of the spiritual journey, is learning to, like, you always talk about this, distancing yourself from the suggestions and all that. You've talked about that a lot.
Well, and I have my uncle Mark to thank with all of that, because I like a couple years ago I came to him with something really personal, and I said what it was, and he thought it was the most hilarious thing in the entire world, and it was something I held just so like lodged in me, deep shame. And he was just like, that's hilarious, that's amazing. And like, he was just like, oh, that's great. I mean, he nearly pissed his pants with laughter. And it was so nice to hear somebody not only like accept me, but also say like, that's funny. And but he's also a self-aware, very self-aware person, Catholic, has his own struggles, knows what it's like to feel pain, knows what it's like to deal with constant pain, and he's always been somebody I can reach out to and say like, hey man, I did this, and he's just like, yeah, we've all been there, and like, can give like a slight perspective shift on it, but cool. That's where that ability to distance kind of comes from, because it's like, I don't know, do you have a couple people in your mind where you're like, how would this, like, where you can respond in their absence, like, do you, because I kind of do that now, where if Mark isn't there, which he's always a text message away, I can just say, how would Mark respond to this? Or there's another person, it's a nurse that I work with, her name's Amy, and she's brilliant, and it's like, if there's a situation going on, it's what would Amy say about this? And I mean, I know that they're obviously not real in my mind, but like, if Invisible Mark or Amy says don't worry about it, then I have this permission to just, put distance between me and whatever that is. And because I'm a pussy, I'm always giving myself permission. They're always very gentle in my head. So it's been really beneficial. It's been more beneficial than it has been harmful. So
I don't really have that. I don't have that, unfortunately. Real life friends, real.
I'm not a real boy, David. So I have to have people in my head represent aspects of my conscience that say yes and no.
Well, it would be nice. I mean, it would be nice to have that. I just don't have much of a social life, unfortunately. But I do have, I don't want to brag, but I do have Christ and the saints. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I think we all have that.
Right.
We all have that. So
we do, and we have them in real time. But the way that we experience them is so different than like, this. Like, if somebody told me I could have this with Jesus just once, I would be like, that would be
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the ultimate. So,
I do think about that, like if I were a disciple, or oh my God, that would be funny. But if I were there back in the day when Jesus walked the earth, and like what would I say? How would I react? Would I be like put off by his astonishing counterintuitive response to absolutely everything that I proposed?
mhm.
Like Saint Peter went through that a lot with him, I guess.
Yeah, get
It
behind
was
me,
like,
Satan. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I think
Yeah,
I
but that's cool though, because then in the moments that you think you're wrong, and then maybe Jesus would be like, "Actually, you're right," and then you could be like, "Whoa," because those are the moments,
uh,
that are really important when you come up to somebody and you think you've really messed up, and to have Jesus tell you you're off the hook. That's like, I mean, that's what confession is.
yeah,
And I've always, actually, I always, I have, I'm very blessed with confession because I almost always walk away from confession feeling just like the weight of the world was like ripped off my shoulders
yeah,
by God Himself.
yeah, for
Do you
sure.
feel? Do you feel?
Yeah,
Do you feel that form of grace
yeah,
with the sacraments?
especially if I'm aware of a burden of sin when I go into the confessional,
Mm-hmm.
which I have, over the past 2 years, like I said, I've been more messed up. So yeah, I've been appreciating it more, and that just the breath and the life and the light and the walking on air and singing and
Yeah.
dancing and but during the 10 years of sort of smooth sailing where I was just like doing pretty well, and my devotions and my walk with God was a little bit more stable
Mm-hmm.
during the first 10 years of my conversion. Uh, a lot of time in the confession, it was like a battle, like with the priest, like, no, like I'm here for a good reason. I'm not wasting your time. Like, yes, this is a sin and whatever. Like, sort of like dealing with priests who are like kind of disappointed that I'm not bringing them something bigger. You know what I mean?
Right.
That feeling like, why? And I've even had a priest say to me, "Why are you wasting your time coming to confession all the time? Why? Like, it's a nice day out. Shouldn't you be out enjoying life and whatever?" I'm like, so that was
Shouldn't you be smoking a crack pipe
my
and
my friend. Yeah, there are a bunch of free new crack pipes being handed out, I heard. But that was sort of my frustration for the first 10 years, when I was sort of like had a lot of grace. And then the past 2 years, God's been sort of like saying, "What can you do?" Right? Like, here, you take the wheel, David. Let's see how you can do it. It's like, still a disgusting worm and a miserable sinner. Okay, so how about you take the wheel again?
he he
I
doesn't do that with me because he knows he's just like, well, if we do that to Aidan, he's so stupid
He'll
that that
destroy
car is
the
gonna
earth.
yeah, it's gonna immediately blow up. So
It's
like,
gonna be the second coming right away.
dude, that's why I literally like I cling. I just like cling on to Mary. I'm just like, dude, like nothing. I've told Jesus before. I'm like, I don't care what I've done. I'm always gonna turn back to you,
Yeah,
always. And it's kind of creepy because it's
yeah,
just like state level 5 clinger kind of
yeah,
attitude. But it's kind
yeah,
of like I've got no other choice. Don't you dare, don't you dare leave me. And it's like, well, that's good. On one level, it's like, sure, my spirituality is like retarded to a certain level and it's never going to go past that,
yeah,
but whatever.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
i
yeah, yeah,
will i will cling on to his robes,
yeah.
at the second coming, and I'm like, you're not sending me anywhere. I'm too pathetic, please. Like,
But the perspective I have on that imagery, which is very powerful, it's like a cartoon image of this little troll, this creepy, stinky troll clinging on to Jesus.
yep,
But
perfect.
the mystical image that I have right away, and from God's point of view, it's like there's the fairy tale before and after. It's like, yeah, the frog is going to be a prince. Like, we know that.
Right.
We know that the frog is really a prince inside. We know that. So that's why when you're acknowledging your frog-like demonic shape and form and stench
Hmm.
and everything, you have to remind yourself that you are a prince. You are a child of God. You're the prince.
Right.
You're the king's kid, and it's just the dragon has turned you into a frog. Like, that's the classic fairy tale.
It
So
is.
it gives it a little bit of a lighthearted touch, your journey and the grotesqueness of your vile ways and all that sort of thing. It gives it a nice comedic touch. It's serious. It's very, very serious. But as
Right.
long as it's the seriousness that is the glue that makes you stick to your Lord and Savior. So, I mean, it's win-win so long as you remember that there's a happy ending to this fairy tale. I think it's pretty
Right.
easy to remember that. I mean, despair is when you forget what salvation history is, and it's accomplished. It has been accomplished. Salvation history has been accomplished. So this is like, we are retarded because it's so easy. It is so easy. And this is what St. Alphonsus Liguori talks about day after day after day after day when I'm reading him. It's like, it is so easy. You go to the sacraments and you receive them in a worthy manner and you pray constantly. Just keep praying and going to the sacraments. It's easy. It's easy. Okay? And if, God forbid, you end up burning in hell, what are you going to be scourging yourself and complaining about? You're going to be complaining that it was so easy and I didn't avail myself of the sacraments. I didn't avail myself of prayer. And it was so easy. That's what we need to remember. And that it's been accomplished. We know how the story goes. We know how it plays out. And we know the good guys and the bad guys. And we know which side we want to be on. It's like, it's too easy. So when I feel despair, when I feel like I'm too gross to go to heaven or whatever, I just have to remind myself, big picture. Like, it's, I know the story, I know the beginning, I know the middle, and I know the end. It's a happy ending. So let's celebrate, let's be joyful. Do you agree?
Yeah. Well, I can't get off the frog image. Have you ever, were you a Simpsons fan?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
So there was an episode of Treehouse of Horror. They had like special Halloween episodes, and one of them parodied Harry Potter, and Bart tries to turn a frog into a prince.
Okay.
And instead of turning the frog into a prince, it just bloats him into this like half man, half frog who's constantly vomiting and saying, "Please kill me. Every moment I live is agony." And it's so disturbing. It's horrible, but I'm just like, not only am I a frog, I'm
You're that frog?
version. I'm that I'm that one. But no, man,
Wow.
it is funny. It's tragic, but we're just so pathetic that it's just like you have to laugh at it, because if you don't, you would despair, and then you just continually reorient yourself. You just continually turn back, to the Lord, and know that He's merciful. And I think that's why. And I'm not big on the Divine Mercy prayer personally. I love it, but I don't use it very much. But that's why I think, and especially Divine Mercy Sunday, I think that those avenues are so important, because they show the excess mercy of God, just the gratuitous nature of His mercy. And it's like, if God desires for everybody to go to heaven, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to worry about if you're constantly turning in His direction,
Yeah.
despite the slop that I have all over me.
Yeah. I remember talking with you I don't know when it was, maybe a month or two ago. And we were talking about I was expressing some confusion and doubt about the suffering and death of Christ, the vicarious atonement, this sort of thing. I don't know if you remember that, but I've had a little breakthrough because of St. Alphonsus Liguori. I'm reading his collected works. The breakthrough I had, because he emphasizes the same points over and over and over and over again, and I finally realized why Christ was tortured so grievously and why he died in such a disgusting manner. I finally realized, thanks to St. Alphonsus, why that is. It's all about the ultimate, this is going to sound obvious to any Christian, okay? But I finally, sort of got it. That it's like, he didn't need to do that. He could, as we all know, he could have just said a little prayer. He could have shed one drop of blood from his finger. He didn't need to go through all of the passion, right? And I never could figure out why he did that. And some Protestant sects say, oh, it's the wrath of God and the wrath of God and the wrath of God. And I've heard other Protestants saying, no, that's not very Christian. That's not very nice. Like, we can't paint it that way. But St. Alphonsus Liguori paints it in the nicest way possible, I think, that I've heard. And I'm sure it's very well known sort of approach among all the saints, but it's just the excess of love. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
but the key that I finally understood, is it's a one-on-one relationship, Jesus and myself, or Jesus with you, Jesus with everyone. And it's kind of like he's bending over backwards, like making sure, like, do you understand that I love you? Like, do you, do you get it?
Right.
Do you get it? Like, it's like,
Right.
he's reaching right to the bottom of the barrel, to the lowest scumbag, the most hateful, selfish sinner, right to scraping the bottom of the barrel. And he's saying to that person, who's probably me, you know, do you get it? Like, I love you. And I not only not only could I and would I suffer everything for you, I did. I did. I did it for you, you know. So I finally kind of understand now. I have a comfort level now that I didn't really have before, with that whole bloody mess, because it is ugly. I mean, it is ridiculous, and I understand the enemies of Christ mocking and ridiculing our religion, when they look at the Son of God and how he was tortured and killed. I understand. I can sympathize with that. It's absurd. It is absurd. But that's the thing about love, right? It's it's not rational. It's not irrational, but it doesn't make sense except to the beloved, like the lover and the love the beloved. And it's just like like a
Right.
secret sort of thing, and you have to enter into it, and it has to be personal.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's just nonsense. It's like what St. Paul says, you know, the foolishness of God, and it's a stumbling stone for the Greeks and whatever. Like, I mean, it's many, many things, the passion and death of Christ. But
Well,
until you're there as the recipient of that love, and you sort of are one-on-one getting the message, like, hey, are you
it's hitting you yet?
are you
Yeah.
you know, you getting my message here? So yeah, that was a little mini breakthrough I had this week.
That's really awesome. I mean, when you take something, you take like a little nugget of truth that, you know, a quote from a saint or a Bible verse or a mystery, and you start playing with it, it's easy to agree with whatever that truth is at first, just to acquiesce to it and to say, like, yeah, that's really, you know, but to really like jump into the depths of it, it has to like stay with you for a really long period of time. And it sounds like you got to a point with that where you got to a point of unknowing where you're like, I don't understand this anymore. Because I'm sure when you first converted, you're like, yeah, I get the passion. I can, you know, I get God's love.
The Coles Notes version, Christ loves you, Jesus loves me, yes I know, for the Father
Yeah.
told me so, whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, which it's good. You have to start at the beginning, and you have to be able to start at the basic. But then you get to that point where you're like, you start to doubt it, and that's just another way of like cracking it open and knowing it more. But which sounds like you came out on that side. But I was talking to my uncle the other week about this, and I shot him a text message, and I was like, do you think that the passion of Jesus was like a representation of God's eros, like an erotic form of love for man?
Mm-hmm.
And his response was just a simple no. Which I love. I'm like, okay, all right, that's your opinion. But I wondered always, like, why is the word passion used? Like, and I wondered that as a kid too. Why is it called Christ's passion? Why did Jesus experience, like, why is it the passion? Like if you think about it, if like that's how you express passion towards somebody, to like basically be flagellated to death and mocked and then made to carry your instrument of death, you know, to that location, that's kind of sadistic, and that's like the weirdest expression of love ever. But the more that I deep dive into those mysteries, it's like, oh yes, it is an expression of a deep personal, not erotic in the, you know, sexual sense, but like erotic in the sense of
Intimacy and union.
yes, and like pursual, like
Yeah,
like
courtship,
there's
courtship,
yeah, like a
courtship.
courtship, yeah. And so, um, so he didn't have to do any of that, but God is a passionate lover, and he did, and that's how he chose to show us. And like you're saying, scraping the bottom of the barrel. And for somebody who's very scrupulous like myself, I would need I would need that. That's one of the reasons why I don't think Krishna is God. You know, Krishna got shot with an arrow. You know, he came as God incarnate, and then a hunter accidentally killed him with an arrow. And it's like, who cares? Jesus, like okay, God was accidentally killed in a hunting act, so God was Bambi, right? But like, God, Jesus, literally degraded himself to the form of an infant, was born into ridiculous poverty, um, grew up in one of the lowest trades possible, then lived homeless for years during his ministry, and then was, you know, beaten cruelly, mercilessly by a group of, what's the word I'm looking for? Christians always get accused of it. Hypocrites. That's the word I'm looking for. Killed by a group of hypocrites. And it's like, can you, like, if you really just stop to think about that, like God literally, like you said, scraped the very bottom of the barrel just to say, I love all of you and I want all of you with me. And,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
I always like to emphasize the one-on-one thing. It's like you, Aidan, you. It's like it's all about you
you,
and God.
it
You. I
is all
did this
about
for
me. David,
you.
thank you.
You can let Liz. You can let your brother know. I forgot your brother's name now.
That
Uh,
doesn't matter. Just call him, just call him Jennifer. You can let Jennifer know that
uh,
he's,
what the
Kieran.
hell is? Yeah. Oh, he spoiled it. I love searching my memory for names. I love that. That's my favorite thing to do. What was that guy's name? I love searching. Like, what was his name? What was his name? I love that. It's so much fun.
I like it better if you'd call him Jennifer Lisney for
Jennifer
now.
Lisney. Okay. The sister you never had.
That's right. He's gender fluid now. So if you can, um,
Yeah.
on any given day, it's
I
subject to
want to
change.
I want to change the topic, not because I'm uncomfortable with Jennifer, but because a good friend of mine was like uh challenging me. I didn't have time to respond because I was on my way out the door from his house.
Uh-huh.
But he's like, "Come on, David, you can't be God and man. You can't know everything and then, be worried about your upcoming crucifixion. You can't have both. Let's just pick one. Like, what's it going to be? Are you going to be God? Okay, then you know everything and you can never be hurt. If you're going to be crucified and you're scared about it, you don't know, like you're worried about it, then you're not God. You can't be both. You can't have both. So let's just pick one. That's why Christianity, he was basically saying that's why Christianity doesn't make any sense. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a chance to answer because I was on my way out the door and I didn't want to, like, it was like 3 in the morning. I didn't want to stay till 6 in the morning. So, I think I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with the mystery of the incarnation. Like but the incarnation's a mystery. You're not going to understand it. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
The Trinity's a mystery. You're not going to understand it. Sorry.
Right.
Okay. I'm comfortable with that. I'm also comfortable with the fact that Christ had two natures, human and divine, two wills, human and divine,
Mm-hmm.
and that his human will was perfectly subject to the divine will. And I find it actually helpful rather than saying, well, because when I first joined Christianity, I didn't believe it, but I was talking with my monk and I said basically the same thing. It's like, that's not fair because, I mean, oh yeah, he sweat blood and he was so scared of the crucifixion, but he knew the end story. He knew the end. He knew the outcome.
Right.
But
Right.
what I soon came to understand as I entered into Christianity and came to accept it is that the whole point is to enter into the life of Christ. Kill the old man, right? The
Mm-hmm.
insecure me, the stupid me, the one who's bound for hell because of my sins. Kill that one. And not I that live, but Christ who lives in me. And
Mm-hmm.
so now everything Christ has, I have. Everything Christ has, I have. So yes, I'm scared of pain. Yes, I'm annoyed by inconvenience. Yes, I'd be more comfortable in a 5-star hotel than in some small, cold, damp manger. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know the end of the story. I know the happy ending that
Right.
awaits me. There's no difference. There's no difference. And I have a human will, yes. But I also know that if I align myself with God's will, it's all good. I'm going to get through. I'm going to pass through the passion. So I didn't have a chance to explain that to him, but do you think that's a sort of good Cole's Notes version of explaining why it's not cheating? God wasn't cheating when he
Right.
incarnated, and he wasn't pretending to be scared of suffering. He really was, because he really had a human nature. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I also, it does. Now, it always raises more questions. I think he is kind of thinking in terms of, I think he's confusing with other arguments, similar to like, could God make a round, like a round square,
Yeah.
or a circular
Stony couldn't
square,
live. Stony
or
couldn't
can
live.
God make a burrito? So yeah, like, can he make a burrito so big he can't even eat it himself? Like, see, God can't make a burrito so big that he himself can't
Yeah.
eat it because it's a contradiction. Whatever.
Yeah.
So I guess it's an apparent contradiction that God can't be God and man at the same time. Um, but I always wondered if there was a willfulness, a willingness to abandon certain aspects of himself during points of suffering,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
unity with us.
Yeah.
So
That's dogma. That's dogma.
yeah, okay. So yeah, I should probably read more about my faith. But like,
I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think
no,
I think I read
would
that.
I would imagine that would be correct. But so like the yoga teacher that I learned from, um, he was garbage. Bikram, he used to sit up on his little throne and used to say stuff like Jesus was a yogi, and he did not experience any pain when he went through the crucifixion because he practiced all the yoga principles. And I was like, that's garbage, absolute garbage. If Jesus didn't experience pain during his passion and death, then what would it have meant? It would have just been like, like a
Theater.
play that he was acting out. It didn't. It would be void of any kind of meaning, and I would have no connection to it because it's, and that's kind of what this dude is kind of getting at. Like, well, Jesus couldn't really feel pain, and I went through that too, where it's just like, well, God suffered, and I'm just like, yeah, but he was God, so it doesn't count because he was God, and God can do anything, and it's like, yeah, but he didn't have to, and he condescended, to that level to do stuff. So spend more time with it. So I get where your friend is coming to, but if God literally is all powerful, which he is, um, then he can do whatever he wants, and you kind of have to take a step of faith into the direction of he would will his own suffering in that circumstance for solidarity, for the sake of uniting himself with humanity. Otherwise, the externals would be bull. They just wouldn't mean anything.
Yeah. The other thing to contemplate, I'm just saying this as a general statement, whoever's listening, is that there's a direct connection and correlation between the amount of sin in the world, from the beginning to the end, that the total amount of sin, and the amount of suffering. It's a direct proportion. It's like, let's imagine Adam and Eve fell from grace. They fell from grace. Yes, they did. But they were more successful in cooperating with the graces of God, and they repented, and they were able to cooperate to the extent that they had more perfect contrition, and they struggled with their children to make them have more, be more open to grace and more cooperative with grace. And they told two friends, and they told two friends, and so on and so forth. And then, 5,000 years later, or however old the universe is now, 6,000 years, 7,000 years, whatever it is, there's just less sin. This is like sort of like a fantasy story of how it could have been after the fall. There could have been less sin, depending on how Adam and Eve and their children and their children's children cooperated with the graces they were given. There could have been less sin, just like there could have been more sin. And the passion would have been different. It would have been more or less painful for Jesus Christ, for the God-man Jesus Christ. It's important to think about that. Why? Because it's not just, oh, Jesus suffered a lot, and then it's disconnected from today with our war, with our corruption, with our lies, with our all this stuff that's going on today, and with our own personal contribution to the wounding of Christ, right? Like, I think it's always very, very important to be mystically connected. God's outside of time, and in our faith, in our spiritual life, we are also free to connect the dots outside of time and say, no, I will not sin again, not even a venial sin, because I know that that's contributing to the suffering of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. It's not a story. It's not like just something like a trick to help me to sin less. It's a real fact that the more I sin, the more Christ suffered. Right? It's a fact.
I'm gonna have to spend some time with that, because that's good.
You do believe it though, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that it's always been there, but I never picked it up and really examined it the way that I should have, just because I'm so easily distracted, and like it's not obvious.
It's something to meditate on. Something to meditate on.
Definitely, yeah. But, and so I'm gonna take that.
The godless heathen will say, well, that doesn't make any sense, because the amount of suffering is already fixed in time. Jesus Christ suffered X amount, and there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do, free will or not. There's nothing you can do that's ever going to change the amount that Jesus Christ suffered, and that is true. But the thing that the godless heathen are forgetting is that God's outside of time, and he saw all the free choices that we would each make, and that's how much Christ had to suffer, right?
Well, and that's why I like the sorrowful mysteries, because I like the idea that the more that I contemplate those, the more comfort I give him.
Yeah.
I'm mystically,
there for him.
To those.
You're there for him.
Yeah, in those moments. So I always wonder, I wonder if Jesus was chilling out in the garden, and by chilling out, I mean suffering profusely and sweating blood. Which lately, by the way, the image in my mind has just been him there crucified in soul, basically, which is like essentially what he was experiencing, and most mystics say that was the
worst moment. Worst moment.
Yeah, and so part of me wants to know, is he like, thank you, Aidan? Is he there and like, thank you, David, thank you for thinking about, thank you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you know
for
what
sure,
I mean?
For sure. It's real.
Right.
We can be there for him. We can be there with him. And the other thing, I want to give you another golden nugget that comes from my own personal experience with the Rosary, which is this is really exciting. I want you to use this if you can. Okay. Anyone listening, I want you to use this. One of my favorite things is, like, for example, the scourging at the pillar. Okay, I think that in terms of like physical pain and whatever, that's also pretty devastating. And of course, it's all about the spiritual thing, the betrayal, and how we betray Jesus and all that sort of thing. But even
his best buds were totally asleep.
But take any of take any of his suffering during the sorrowful mysteries. And when you're meditating, when you're doing a rosary on the sorrowful mystery, just not only are you there for him so that, like, he's being comforted in that moment 2,000 years ago, but he's also, what I think, is being transported into, like, here I am in my little room here. I got my prayer shrine here. He comes into my body.
Yep.
And he is like, wow, this is amazing. Compared to being strapped to that pillar and being, scourged. It's like a little mini break that I'm giving him, right? It's like these language exchange students, like, oh, okay, you go to Germany and I send my kids over to your family in the USA or whatever it is. It's like a little exchange program. So I give Jesus a chance to come into my little office here for a few moments or minutes, whatever it is, and just take a little break, So it's like a real exchange. Like, he really is here with me instead of feeling the pain over there.
I like that.
So it's it's like a real vacation that I give him.
That actually reminds me of a quote that I've been stuck on, and I'm actually going to shout out to my Uncle Mark again.
Wow!
Because he just he bought me this book. It's called A Rocking Horse Catholic by Carol Houselander, who was an English mystic.
Okay.
And she had a couple of mystical experiences. And one of these, which I'm about to read to you, was on it was on an underground train. Sorry, I'm like reading one of the words accidentally here. All sorts of people jostled together, sitting and strap hanging, workers of every description going home at the end of the day. Quite suddenly I saw with my mind, but as vividly as a wonderful picture, Christ in them all. But I saw more than that. Not only was Christ in every one of them, living in them, dying in them, rejoicing in them, sorrowing in them, but because he was in them and because they were here, the whole world was here too. All those people who had lived in the past and all those yet to come. I came out into the street and walked for a long time in the crowds. It was the same here on every side, in every passerby, everywhere, Christ. I had long been haunted by the Russian concept of the humiliated Christ, the lame Christ limping through Russia, begging his bread, the Christ who all through the ages might return to the earth and come even to sinners to win their compassion by his need. Now, in the flash of a second, I knew that this dream is a fact, Christ in humankind. I saw too the reverence that everyone must have for a sinner. Instead of condoning his or her sin, which is in reality their utmost sorrow, one must comfort Christ who is suffering in them, and this reverence must be paid even to those sinners whose souls seem to be dead, because it is Christ who is the life of the soul who is dead in them. They are his tombs, and Christ in the tomb is potentially the risen Christ.
Wow. Wow. I got
Which is
chills.
so like that's so baller, you
Chills.
know, the idea that like what you're saying, like there's a moment in time that like he is, you know, not pulled because he comes, but you know,
He's
joining
invited. He's
us, he's
invited.
invited, you know, and then is there, and then like completely corroborated in like every human being, whether or not they know it, you know, there is this aspect of Jesus living, dying, being born, etc., etc.
Can you imagine a real human, non-divine person, soldier that's in a really disgusting war over some country right now or in the past, World War One, whatever you want to picture? It's a man suffering the horrors of war, okay? And he hasn't slept, he hasn't eaten, he hasn't had water, his feet are wet. It's just, there's the noise, there's the danger. It's just a bloody mess. And he's seen people die, his friends, his enemies, everyone's dying, and he's all in danger of death all the time. Okay, it's a stressful situation. It's not very pleasant. And there are plenty of examples of that throughout history. Okay, now imagine a new service, like a new trend that comes on instead of the metaverse. We have this thing where we figured out that we can give that guy a little timeshare in your crappy life. And that, just imagine now how much you would appreciate your life when you think, oh, my job sucks, oh, my wife is annoying. But just
I thought you were
imagine.
going to say, "Oh, my wife is sleeping with somebody
No,
else."
no, but just imagine. Just imagine now. Just imagine you're doing this timeshare thing, right?
Uh-huh.
And you just realize, wow, like what I'm giving this guy is pretty good. Like, I mean,
Right.
it's like I walk in 3 meters that way, I've got a little faucet I can open. There's like clean drinking water. I walk another 2 feet, there's like a fridge with food in it. You know, I got a roof over my head. The temperature's pretty livable. Like, I mean, it's just like,
Not in Canada, but that's okay.
no, but you know what I mean? It's like, hold on. Now, why am I complaining about how crappy my life is again? It's like if I do this timeshare with this guy that's in the thick of a really crappy situation, or a child that's being abused by his uncle, or whatever it is, you're doing
Right.
a timeshare. Then you suddenly have an appreciation. Wow, I'm giving this kid a pretty good
Right.
timeshare. You know?
But you know what? My dad is a big proponent in talking to the Lord and saying, um, take something that I'm suffering today, and whatever you won't allow me to experience with relief, can you give that to somebody else who's out there who can take the suffering and use that as a form of relief from whatever their suffering is. And so he doesn't have the visual of like whatever their suffering is,
Right,
but he
right, right.
knows, he says to me, well, God is so good, and I have no reason not to believe that he wouldn't answer that little simple request for me
Explain it again. How does the exchange work?
so if he's experiencing some kind of suffering
Yeah.
or doing some kind of fast for the church, or
Okay.
whatever it is, you know, whatever the
Penance or whatever.
whatever yeah, whatever the penance is, he'll say, well, hey, look, since I have to go without, or because this situation is really
Okay.
terrible and I'm not experiencing any kind of immediate relief, will you give that immediate relief that I'm seeking to somebody
Oh,
else?
okay. 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 Okay.
And he really truly believes, and I believe too, that God is so good that he'll find somebody
Yeah.
that, you know, yeah, I'm not eating a meal. Find somebody that can have a meal today and give them the meal that I want to be eating.
That's cool.
And
That's cool.
and I like that there is that, what you're suggesting, that time swap. You're suggesting it for a different reason, for like a gain in perspective. But I think one of the cooler things is that you can gain the perspective, but you can also participate in,
Yeah.
because if we do it for people that are in purgatory,
Yeah.
life is potentially purgation and purgatory
Yeah.
itself. So why can't, like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
why do we limit ourselves with our
100%.
prayer?
100%. I agree. That's a real gem. I'm going to take that with me. Now, if only I could have the discipline to deprive myself of a pleasure.
You don't even have to start there. You just have to, like, have a crappy day at work
Okay.
and just say,
Any inconvenience,
like,
any mild inconvenience.
any mild inconvenience that you're like, you're like,
Cha-ching,
all right,
cha-ching.
yeah, and you just say, hey, Lord, timeshare, and
Yeah.
he'll be like, oh, all right, David,
Cool.
I'll take that.
Cool.
like,
That's exciting.
I'm gonna give Aidan a better day at work because
I think this is the best. This is the best tip and trick you've ever given me right here. So thank your dad.
I will thank my dad, and I will tell him to watch
Or
this.
better yet,
Tell him to come on
don't
and
thank
talk
your
to you.
dad. Don't thank your dad. Thank some random person.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, you can.
No, it's true.
You can
I will.
him.
No, my daddy's so cute. He's definitely deserves some.
Is
some
he gonna
thanks.
come on and chat about his faith on my podcast one day?
He's a shy. No, you know what? He's not shy. He's just a humble man. He'd probably think that he's no good, but he's watched your podcast and really enjoyed your podcast. So
oh my God, he's heard all my sins and all my propensities to evil.
Nah, he's cool, man. My dad would tell you he's far more sinful than you. My dad's so cool. He's just such a man broken by his sin that he's just like soft and kind and nice and loving to everybody.
That's how I want to be.
Yeah. Well, and Rachel always says, like, your dad looks like he has a sadness in his eyes, and it's just like it's sadness, but it's this love. It's this general, like, it's this
compassion,
like knowledge of brokenness, and it's really cool.
Wow.
I know that I can always go to my daddy and he'll say something that's it's like my Uncle Mark, it's like this verbal equivalent to a hug, which we all need every once in a while. So
very cool. I'll leave it there because I do have to go, but that was excellent. I like your idea to talk about the rosary. It wasn't that focused, but you did manage to bring us onto focus a couple of times. And you gave me some real gems to think about. So thank you so much. I love you so much.
I love you too, buddy. I really thank you for, like, engaging me and letting me.
So we're officially engaged now, right?
Yeah. No, thank you for just, like, letting me like have a moment where I'm like, I want to have more internet time, which is like ridiculous. But
you're gonna start your channel with your brother about the ladder of ascent.
We really need to do that, actually, and I wouldn't even want to narrow it anymore. I would just want to talk about prayer in general. But I don't know where Kieran's at with any of that, because he's on his own path. He might not have the attention.
He's done a real deep dive into Jennifer, I think, right now. That's where he's at.
Yes, she has.
The gender fluid thing is so important to Kieran.
It's so funny. You gave me a couple of gems of advice, but you also allowed me an avenue to make fun of my brother in front of everybody,
the world.
So.
Millions of viewers.
That's right. She'll get over it. So
there are literally I have millions of fans. Just not too many of them are on this planet. That's the only.
Well, you have a great. That's good. I like that. That's good. All right, buddy. Well, thanks, I will talk to you soon.
God bless you.
Maybe we'll actually do a rosary themed talk for real at some point.
Well, we could do it. We could do it every week. It could be like the Rosary Hour with, what's your name again?
My name's Jennifer. Yeah.
We'll do the Rosary Hour. We'll do the Rosary Hour with David and the other guy.
All right, sounds good, man.
The Lisney brother. And so take care of yourself. Say hi to your brother and tell him I was just joking about the whole transgender thing.
Yes. No, I'm not going to tell him that. I'm going to tell him you're very serious. All right, man. You take care. I'll keep you in my prayers.
And you're mine.
All right.
Love you. Bye.
Later. Love you too.